This week we're talking about human genetics, chapter 5, and today we're going to talk about the first section, which talks about human inheritance and how it's a little bit more complicated than inheritance in pea plants. So yesterday you kind of scanned over the chapter, and let's take a look here. Whoops. So the first two words that you were supposed to look at in the textbook were multiple alleles. And when you talk about multiple alleles, the best example of this is in blood types. So first of all, who can tell me, what does it mean, multiple alleles? Or maybe better yet, what's an allele? Who remembers what's an allele? So alleles are different forms of a gene for a certain trait. So how about this? In Mendel's pea plants, what were the different alleles for height? What were the different choices for height? Tall and short, right? So there was tall or short, right? And for so those are different alleles. You could have a big T or a little t. Now, when you have multiple alleles, what that means is that there are more than two choices. So for blood type, you've probably heard before, you can have type A, you can have type B, you can have type O, or you can have type AB. So there's not just tall and short. There's a whole bunch of different possibilities. And so this is one of the reasons why human genetics is more complicated than pea plants, is some things are being controlled by more than one allele. There's more than one allele to do it. The other thing the textbook tells you is in human inheritance, you can also have things that are being influenced by different genes. So like eye color, it seems pretty straightforward that you've got blue eyes and brown eyes. But then you've got hazel eyes and kind of grayish eyes, and they're being influenced by more than just one gene in one location. But let's take a look at blood types. In the textbook, does anyone see in the textbook what page the blood types are on? All right, I can explain this a little bit differently than the textbook does, because the textbook has it like the letter I and then a letter, but the blood type has to do, so you've got your red blood cells, right? Your red blood cells have a protein on the outside of the cell, and that is the blood type. Blood types actually weren't discovered until like the 1930s when they tried doing transfusions, and sometimes a blood transfusion worked perfectly and saved the person's life, and sometimes a blood transfusion made the person much sicker, and they got a fever and they got very sick and sometimes died. And the problem is that if it was a different blood type, the body basically rejects it and treats it like it's bacteria or something. So basically, there are two different proteins you can have on the surface of your blood. You can have the A protein, or you can have the B protein, and O means there is no protein on the surface of your blood. So the way I like to draw this is like this. So multiple alleles, more than two alleles for a trait. And so for blood type, the phenotype, or the physical appearance, is going to be what your blood type is. And then the genotype will be which alleles you have, right? So let's clear this and start over so we can draw it together. The way I like to do this, if you have type A blood, then your genotype, then you're going to have the A protein on the surface of your blood cells. And so I like to draw it like this. I draw a blood cell and I put A's on the top of it. So A is dominant, but it turns out, so your genotype, you could have A, but the weird thing about blood types is you have two dominant that are codominant, A and B, and then O is actually recessive. So you could actually also have A, O. And those would be the two different genotypes that could make up type A blood. Does that make sense? Because if you had AO, you'd still have some A proteins. Okay, so then if you have type B blood, what are your possible genotypes? Take a wild guess. You can figure it out. Okay, it could be B, B, or it could be BO. I know. And then your red blood cell, then I just put letter B's on the outside. Makes it look kind of like a flower. Okay, that's type B blood. So you have the B protein on the surface. Now, you could also have type AB blood, right? So what would your genotype be then? AB. Any other possibilities? No, it's either AB or BA, so it's AB. And so then your blood cells are going to have both the A protein and the B protein on the surface. Perfect sense, right? Then the fourth blood type you could have is type O. Now, type O blood means you have none of these extra proteins on the surface of your blood cells. So this is going to be the recessive. So type O. What genotypes could you have for type O? O. And then your blood cells will not have any other proteins on the surface. Make sense? So those are the blood types. You've got multiple alleles, and there are 4 different blood types you could have. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different genotypes you could have, but 4 different blood types. Now, when they talk about blood types, if you need a transfusion, if you have type A blood, so your body is going to reject any protein it does not recognize. Okay? So you can only get blood with proteins that your body knows. So if you have type A blood and you needed a transfusion, what kind of blood could they give you? Type A or, yeah, type A, but it's still type A. You can also get type O because type O has no extra proteins. You know, you would guess that not very many people have type O, right? You know what? It's the most common blood type there is. So the positive and the negative is yet another protein that's inherited separately from this. So you could have A positive or A negative, B positive or B negative, AB positive or negative, O positive. And negative is fairly rare to not have the Rh protein. But anyways, the point is that type O is what we call the universal donor. The most common blood type is O positive, and so you can give type O blood to anybody because it doesn't have those extra proteins on the surface. Okay? Mm-hmm.
If you have type O, you only receive type O then?
Yeah, so if you have type O blood, you can only receive type O blood. But again, since it's the most common blood type there is, it ends up to really not be so much of a problem because there's plenty of it. Now, which type of blood would be able to receive any other type of blood? Think about it. AB, right? Because if you have type AB blood, this is going to be the universal recipient. Because can you get type A blood? Yeah. Can you get type B blood? Yeah. Type AB? Yeah. Type O? Yeah. So type AB blood, any type of blood would be fine for you. Okay. Questions? Yeah, the most rare blood type, I would have to look it up. It might be like AB negative. I'm not entirely sure. And it's interesting in different populations, different races, different isolated populations have different blood types that are most common. That would just be, so the positive and negative is called the Rh factor. They found out about that later. And almost everybody has that protein. And so if you don't have it, you're called Rh negative. So that's what that is. Okay. No, with unless you're getting the only time it really matters what blood type you have is if you need a transfusion. Other than that, it doesn't really. Like I said, they didn't even know about this until the 1930s, and I believe it was in World War I, and they were doing transfusions to try to help save soldiers, and they were trying this, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, and so therefore they discovered blood types. Last question about blood types, and we're going to move on. The question is, how do you know what blood type you have? And honestly, we used to do this lab in class, and they don't let us do it anymore because it involves pricking everybody's finger and getting little blood samples. But basically what you do is you get this clotting factor that will attack the sample if it has a certain protein. So what we do is you stab your finger with a sterile thing, and you put a drop of blood on this card, and then you put the antibody in it. And if the antibody attacks it, it gets all clotted up like this, and that means that you have that protein. So this says A, and this says B. And then you put a drop of the B one on, and if that one clots up also, that means you have both of the proteins. And if they both just stay watery and nothing happens, then it means you have type O. So we used to do that as a lab, which is kind of fun, but yeah, we don't do that anymore. So yeah, that is multiple alleles. The other thing real quickly, and then we'll go on to our worksheets for today. The other thing you're supposed to look at, whoops, oh, yeah, maybe we should do a, this is actually on one of your worksheets you're going to do today. Just do this real quick. Let's just do it. So a parent with type O blood. So guys, the phenotype is type O. What's the genotype? What alleles does this parent have? Heterozygous parent with type B blood. Heterozygous. Oh. Well, see, that's an easy one because, but the thing is, on one of the Punnett scores I give you, there is a chance that the kid, like if you had one parent that had, how does that work? You can actually do it so that the kid does not have the same blood type as the parent. As either parent. Anyway. All right, we'll let you suffer through those later. Let's real quickly look. You guys know what the sex chromosomes are, right? What's the sex chromosomes? Yeah, this is what determines if you are a boy or a girl. It's chromosome 23. Humans have 23 chromosomes, and this is the 23rd set. If you are a girl, you have XX, and if you're a boy, you have XY. So everybody has an X. The X chromosome itself has lots of information about making a human being. The Y chromosome has all of the information about being a boy, about being a male. The Y chromosome turns on the testosterone for development of all that male stuff, like understanding football statistics and being able to identify airplanes just like that. Oh. And all that other Y chromosome stuff. Anyways, so guys, so the question is, what if it's YY? And it can't be for two reasons. One is the X chromosome, as I mentioned, it has so much information about making a human being. If you don't have an X chromosome, there's not enough information to make a human being, and the embryo just won't grow. The other thing, if you remember, when you get genes from your parents, right? You get an X from mom. You have to get an X from mom. And you get either an X or a Y from dad. So you couldn't get two Ys. Unless you had some weird thing where the chromosomes stick together, which happens sometimes. But yeah, it won't work. Baby won't grow. Yep. They do, yeah. So sometimes, remember metaphase where the chromosomes line up on the middle, right? And then they separate, remember that? Sometimes instead of separating and one going each way, they stick together. And so then this one would have an extra chromosome. So what if it ended up to be XXY, right? Yeah, no, actually what happens, you would think that, having an extra chromosome might give you like superpowers or awesome strength. But it turns out, and you'll read this in the second section that we'll do tomorrow, having little bits of extra chromosomes actually causes huge genetic disorders and developmental abnormalities, and it just doesn't work out well. Having too much information in this case is really bad. So there are some cases of XXY, but and generally, if there is a Y, it's a male, because once you have the Y, it makes the testosterone turn on. Okay, hang on. Let's move to sex-linked traits real quickly, because this is something else you're going to see on your worksheet. So here's the trick. With sex-linked traits, some traits are going to show up more often in males than females, because if it's a dominant recessive trait, right, the females could get a dominant and a recessive. But how many copies of the gene would the male get? Only one if it's on the X chromosome, right? So the male would only have a dominant or a recessive trait. So one of the very common examples of this is color blindness. So color blindness. No, it's a common sex-linked trait, but it's going to be more common in males than females, because a female could have normal vision. It could be big C, which is carrying a carrier for the colorblind gene, or they could be big C, or if the female is colorblind, it's going to be little c. The male can either be colorblind or, regular vision or colorblind. Does that kind of make sense? I think I have a better, here we go. Yes, if that trait is there, it's 50-50 for males. Okay, so if you take a look at this, see we got female, male, big C is color vision, whoops, little c is colorblind. So a female could be big C, which is normal vision, big C, little c, which is regular vision, but she's a carrier, right? She's carrying that trait. Or little c, which is colorblind. And the male is either big C or little c. Well, but males only get one copy. So if that gene is there, so you'll get a chance to do some Punnett squares with this. But this is, and then on one of the pages, what page is that you're looking at right there? 148. On page 148 in the textbook, they have a picture of what it looks like to a colorblind person. The most common type of colorblindness is red-green colorblind. So it's not that they see the world in black and white, but the reds and greens look very similar. My husband is actually colorblind, and he sees colors, he sees shades of colors really well. But like your wool socks that are kind of brown or kind of greenish color, he knows if they match or not, but he doesn't know if they're brown or green. Right? So it's those kinds of colors. He can usually see really bright colors. This is a pretty extreme one here on page 148, because that's a very bright red barn and a very green field. But to a colorblind person, it all kind of looks the same color of tan. Okay? I think it's about 10%, 1 in 10 males are colorblind, and it's obviously much less for females. So here's a question for you. My husband is colorblind, and we had a baby boy. As far as I know, there's no color blindness whatsoever in my family. Is there a chance our child would be colorblind?
Yes.
Is there?
Yeah, yes there is. Because your dad, no, your husband.
My husband is colorblind. Well, here, hang on. Assume I'm not a carrier, because nobody in my family at all that I know of. Could he? Here. Here, guys, here's me. Here's me, big C. Here's my husband, little c, y. Okay? Oops. So, but if we have a boy, who does the little boy get the X from, me or my husband? Yeah. So if it's a boy, you know he will have normal vision, right? But if it's a girl, you know for a fact that the girl will be a carrier. So no, there's a 0% chance of us having a colorblind child. However, if we had a girl, we know that she would pass on that gene to the next generation. Or she would. Nope. Okay. So next we're going to take a look at a worksheet to practice this information. We'll go on to more stuff tomorrow.